Thanks to Card Market for sponsoring today's video. It's the best place in Europe to buy your Daisy Ducks. This weekend, I'm going to be in Sweden at Malmo Games Week. I'm going to be casting a big Disney Lorcana tournament on both Saturday and Sunday, so make sure you check out the live stream. If you're in the area, you want to sign up, you can get your hands on all of these amazing prizes. It will be great to see you there. If you want to sign up for Malmo Games Week, the link is in the description. Welcome in everybody to a very exciting video. We're looking at so many tournament decks from the Set 5 metagame. Loads of events at the weekend. We had a winner case at London, which I did a live stream from. We're going to be looking at the top 8 decks from there. There was a winner case in Italy, in North America there was one. And there was also a bunch of big Set 5 side events at Disney Lorcana Challenge Toronto. Of course, the challenge itself was Set 4. If you want to see my video on that, I have covered all those decks. But let's crack on by looking at starting with the decks in London. The tournament, I finished 17th place. Had a good start and kind of fell off towards the end, unfortunately. This was a 2-game format competition with a top 8 best of 3. The top 4 players did split, which included Monty here. And Monty sticking with his favorite Ruby Amethyst deck. Only one Milan as the one drop. Not playing, for example, Daisy Duck. Not playing Pluto. Instead, maybe being able to fit in some more expensive uninkables. I mean, you look at the top end, you've still got those 3 Maleficent Monstrous Dragons. I'm not convinced that they would personally be in my build of Mufasa. Of course, it's great when you roll them off Mufasa. And if you can get to 9 ink, I'm sure they're tremendous. So I shouldn't criticize Monty's deck too much because they know this one better than I do, that's for sure. I can be overly critical of decks sometimes. Personally, though, I think the Maleficent is something I would probably not put in my lists. Sisu in there, of course, also only 3 copies of this Emboldened Warrior Sisu. I'd probably like to see 4 copies of Flynn and 4 copies of the Sisu Emboldened Warrior. I think that gives the deck a lot of legs in the early game. Super Goof's also an interesting card to see in the mixer as an additional way of gaining some fast lore. Monty's sticking strong with Julieta. I have to say I like this card a lot. I play against Monty fairly often recently, and the Julieta's always put in some pretty good work, just being able to heal up the Milan Mother Gothel to make them more stats. I did have a conversation with Monty about this deck before the weekend and suggested Perdita as being an interesting way to go, but they decided not to go down that route. You've, of course, got the Rapunzels, no surprises there, the Gaston and Mufasa, the Mauis, all these pretty much auto-include. 3 copies of the Shift Milan, 4 Surfer Stitches, couple of each of the ladies in red with Lady Tremaine and Medusa. Wreck-It Ralph's a new interesting addition as well. When you play this character, return a character card from your discard to your hand. If that card is a princess character, aka Rapunzel, gain 2 lore. Very, very good indeed. Also great to see 1 copy of Revive in the mix. I do have an Enchanted Revive, which I'm still yet to play. And I think Revive could be pretty good in this deck. Being able to revive Rapunzel in particular sounds pretty good. So very solid showing from Monty here with Amber Ruby. I personally feel like this build might be a bit too slow for my taste. I think you could try and make it a bit quicker. I think the Flynn Rider is a good step in that direction. But Daisy Duck, man, I think Daisy Duck is a bit too good not to be playing. But you don't have much synergy with Daisy Duck in this one. You're putting a card on top of your opponent's deck. You've got no real way of making use of that. A good thing this deck can do, though, is it can deal with hyper aggro, and it can be probably quick enough to beat some other decks. With cards like Scar, Sisu, and with the Gaston ramp and the Sisu shift, you can deal with hyper aggro with ease as well as Milan. Good job, Monty. Up next, another top 4 deck from the weekend. It's Teng Ma, who played their top 8 game on my stream. Probably going to be doing a full video on this one. This is a Amethyst Emerald deck, which is a deck I've got a lot of expectations for being pretty strong potentially coming into this set. It's a deck which struggled a lot against Bucky. And of course, now that Bucky is gone, it should do a bit better. I think Amethyst Emerald has the potential to be quite a mid-range deck in a similar style to Amethyst Steel from set 4. Amethyst Steel, of course, has a little bit more control options, whereas if you're going with Emerald instead, you've maybe got a little bit of discard, maybe a little bit of extra aggression. And the Emerald cards in here for Teng Ma are going to be the Clarabelles, the 1-cost Clarabelles to have some item removal, which is something previously this color combination really struggled with. There's a couple of Pegasus, there's a 1-drop, there's Sir Hiss in there, which is interesting as just an evasive card. Conquest for 1 can deal with Diablos, 4 copies of Ursula, 1 Anna, 4 copies of Lyle. I think Lyle is great in this deck. I've been looking for a home for this guy, and it does seem to be the deck for him, seeing as he can sing Friends on the other side. You're welcome, the other one. So Not getting a huge amount of value from the Emerald cards overall. I think the Ursula Deceiver being a really good shift target for the Ursula Sea Witch Queen is a definite big reason to play this color combo. Clarabelle's interesting. I'm not personally massively convinced I would go down the route of Clarabelle in Amethyst Emerald. Amethyst already can draw a lot of cards. Do you really need these Clarabelles in there? I'm not personally convinced. I would probably look at trying to build this deck in a little bit of a more aggressive manner with things like Merfolks, maybe Flynn Rider, Prince John. You guys know me, I love my Prince John. Really nice deck by Tengmar though. I do think he even said himself that after playing the event there were some things that they would change. It's definitely a color combination I'm looking to try out. Big shout out to Tengmar, one of the best players in the UK. In fact, honestly, I would probably go ahead and say he's my pick for best player in the UK right now. Up next, we've got Reese, who wants me to say best player in the UK, but I'm not going to say that. This is Reese, who finished second in Lille. And look at his very, very exciting set 5 heavy Ruby Amethyst deck. Oh, wait, there's not a single set 5 card in here, which honestly, I have to respect. He's brought back Pinocchio Talkative Puppet into the mixer. There's 3 Ruby Amethyst decks, so we'll take a quick look at them. 1 Jim Hawkins, something I know they've been a big fan of in the past. No copy of the library. I feel like the library's got to be good enough to play. I would personally be looking at Magic Brooms and the library. 4 Flynns, 4 Sisus. Flynn definitely making a comeback in these Ruby Amethyst decks. Some Teeth and Ambitions. 4 B Preps, only 3 Brawls. Very interesting to see this. There's a few more Ruby Amethyst decks in this top 8. Reese did get top 4. This one is Jose, who is also on Ruby Amethyst with Rafiki and Olaf as the 1-drops. 2 Pinocchios, 2 Crabs, 1 Giant Sisu, 3 Medusas, 4 B Preps. Cool. And, well, this one's got a set 5 card at least. That's something. And it's Cogsworth. Honestly, not a card I'm a huge fan of. I don't really rate the Cogsworth that much, but it's exciting to see it. I know a lot of people really love this card. I've never really been too convinced personally. When you play this character, chosen character gains rush this turn. It can choose itself, so it can be good at dealing with Merfolks, that's for sure. Very, very good at dealing with Merfolks. Also on the Flynn Riders and the Sisus, couple copies of B King Undisputed in the mixer. Scott beat me, didn't they? And this B King Undisputed absolutely wrecked me. It really, really did. I do feel I got a little bit unlucky against them, but the B King Undisputed hitting my Prince John was absolutely game-winning for them. That Sisu shift also a nice threat, so good job to Scott. They were really nice, and they beat me fair and square. Final 2 lists, because I couldn't get one person's list. I couldn't find it. I'm pretty sure the last 3 lists are all Amber Steel, but we're only going to look at 2 of them, unfortunately. This one is playing some Cinderella Enchanteds, which is very, very nice. Also some Prince Naveen Enchanteds. Must be nice for some. There's also an Aerial Sonic Warrior and some Zeus Enchanteds. Okay, I think this is Jamal, and Jamal's absolutely blinging out. 3 copies of Bare Necessities. Maxing out on Storm Rage on, but not Strength, which is interesting. I would personally always be playing 4 copies of Strength. It's just inkable. Can sing it with the Cinderella, which you've got 4 copies of. The Smee in there. Robin Hood over the Queen is also interesting. 3 copies of Pete. Very, very interesting. 2 Bengers. I honestly like the build quite a lot. I think the main thing for me is I would probably be wanting to play this 4th copy of Strength. And not playing the Queen. Are you going to get punished by not playing the Queen against Hyper Aggro? It's possible. Maybe you're still able to deal with Hyper Aggro though. Up next, a bit of a scuff screenshot because it's very dark, but you can see all the songs you'd expect to see. 4 copies of Strength, only 2 Bare Necessities. There's some Cinderella, Stout-Hearted in the mix. So there's 1 Naveen, 3 Petes, some Piglets in there, as well as 4 Daisies. Shout out to all the people at Brotherhood Games. It was a really fun stream. Up next, we're going to look at the top 8 from Red Saber Games Collectible Exchange Triple Case Tournament. That's a lot of cases. 3 cases, my goodness. All right, top 8. We've got the Hyper Aggro. Now, Hyper Aggro is a deck I've played a little bit. I've got some pretty strong opinions on it. Bare Necessities is very interesting. I honestly respect it. Bare Necessities is going to be able to check for the Grab Your Swords and things like that and actually give you a bit of a chance against Steel Songs if they're shifting in and going for that. You could argue that the Befuddle maybe gives you enough coverage against that kind of deck anyway to just keep bouncing back the Robin Hood. And if you've got enough Befuddles, they might not be able to grab their swords until turn number 4. But Bare Necessities is definitely an interesting card for that kind of coverage. Of course, the downside of playing a card like Bare Necessities is it is going to make your matchups worse elsewhere, potentially. It's not a card you're going to want to top deck into when you're at 19 lore, is what I mean by that. So, no copy of Sorcerer's Spellbook. I think you should always be playing Spellbook in these kind of hyper aggro decks in a similar way to how I always think you should be playing 4 copies of Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom. I do like the 1-drops though. I would personally play 4 Befuddles, but I like that there's a lot of these 1-drops. I like the Mim, I like the Piglet. Simba's an interesting one. Lots of people playing it. I personally didn't go for Simba in my hyper aggro build simply because I prefer to go for many 1-drops on turn number 2 rather than a simple Simba. I like to play triple 1-drop. So personally, I didn't have Simba, Wendy in there. I think Wendy's pretty reasonable. It's just that 1-3 stat line. Then there's Arthur, who I think is decent as a couple cards of it. I also tried it. Baloo and Donald. I would like to see 4 copies of Baloo. I would probably like to see 4 copies of Donald, but I would most certainly love to see 4 copies of Fox. I think only 2 copies of Fox is outrageous. Always play 4 copies of the Fox. It is so good. It's going to be really important for you when you're going second to get back some board control, but it's also just great on something like a Lilo to just replay the Lilo ready to go. They are playing goats. I think if you're going to 4 ink, you probably want to be playing Sven as well. I think Sven's very good. And the Amber card, which readies one of your characters. Not a million miles away from the kind of list I would play, but the things they have added, like the library as well, while it's a great card and has big synergy with Broom and Chernobogs and could be tremendous, my worry about the library is if I top deck it and my opponent's got the entire board, they have no removal left in hand because they've used all their removal, they've used all their Brawls, they've used their Dragon Fires, whatever it might be to remove my Lilo, my Maleficent, and then I play a library and I need 1 law to win, you know, when literally any other card, apart from a Snake or a Fox, would win me the game. The library is going to cost you. So I personally haven't gone for the library in the hyper aggro decks, even though I think the card's great. Very interesting build. I can get behind the bare necessities, but only 2 Foxes would be my biggest concern about that one. And I think if you're bothering with the goat, which most people will, I think it was quite controversial when I was playing it without the goat, and quite possibly not correct. I would be the first to accept that. I think if you're playing 4 cost character, you may as well play more than just the 4 of them. Up next, we've got Travis on Sapphire Amethyst, a deck I'm really interested in and still haven't yet had the chance to experiment with, regrettably. I didn't get to play that much this week, as I've been traveling quite a lot. Chernobog's Followers and Rafiki as the 1-drops. Where are the Magic Brooms, mate? If I'm playing Amethyst, you're going to see me on Magic Brooms. And honestly, you're probably going to see me on the library as well. T-Po's in there, which is interesting. You could bounce back the T-Po potentially as well in this deck, which kind of negates the fact that it's a really low body. You can play it to ramp, bounce it back later, and then just ink it. That's kind of interesting. Quite cool to see T-Po in the mix. Instead of a 1 jump ahead, it's got to be better than a 1 jump ahead, really. Mickey Mouse Crabs. Magica the spell. During your opponent's turn, if an effect would cause you to discard 1 or more cards from your hand, you don't discard. Only 2 goats, 2 bells, 2 Cogsworth. Cogsworth can definitely be quite nice with the rush of the Fox. 4 Elsas, 4 Let It Goes, 2 Cusco, 1 Ana, which is when you play this character, exert all opposing characters, but no shift Ana. Of course, there is a 2-cost Ana that's pretty decent. 2 copies of Ursula Sea Witch Queen, 3 Elsas, and 3 Blue Farsas. Very interesting deck from Travis here. I definitely think Mufasa could find a home in this build. I quite like a single copy of Mufasa, maybe 2 in the Sapphire Emerald decks. He hasn't quite found a home, and maybe this could be the deck for it. I like the addition of T-Po. That's kind of interesting. Okay, up next we've got Lemon and Lime by Nathan, also at Red Saber Games. Lemon and Lime, of course, just coming off the back of winning Disney Lorcana Challenge Toronto. And it got very little new cards. In fact, the only set 4 card in here, 5 card, is You're Welcome. And there's only 2 copies of it. Not too much to talk about there. There's also Ursula, Eric's Bride. You're Welcome does allow Nathan to remove the Crickies from the deck, as it gives you a little bit of extra coverage against locations. I felt like You're Welcome could be a 4 of for that reason. You can just forget about worrying about locations via damage and just use You're Welcome to deal with them. It also can deal with things like Lucky Dime. The biggest combo, of course, with You're Welcome is singing it, putting back something into your opponent's deck. They draw 2 cards, and then you slam You Have Forgotten Me. Discard both of the cards of a Prince drawn down on the board, and you're good to go. Also in the top 8, we have Jafar's New World Order by Christopher B. Jafar is a card I love, and I haven't yet also had the chance to experiment with it. But I've got to bring out a Jafar deck soon, and this deck looks very spicy. I like this build. Do you know what? I like it quite a lot. I'm not going to love everything about it, but just the general concept of this one looks pretty good to me. Fire the cannons over Baboon would be my first question mark. Admittedly, with an Amethyst Chromicon, you've got a lot of card draw, so maybe you can get away with it. I would just wager that the Baboon is going to be a little bit safer. You're going to be wanting to ink the Fire the Cannons relatively often, I would wager. But interesting to see. 3 Smees. Why not 4? Smee is that good. But it's great to see the Archimedes in there with the Shift Archimedes. It's a Shift 3, which has Challenger and Evasive and Conquest for 2. So it's like a 4/4 when it challenges. Good at dealing with Diablo. There's also Grab Your Swords for it to sing. But the Blue Fairy, I think, is a really, really interesting one. And when I mention that there's maybe something I'm not that keen on, it's the fact that you've got this Blue Fairy, but then only 2 copies of Jafar Dreadnought. I feel like if you're playing the Blue Fairy, that's like one of the big reasons to play the Blue Fairy with this Jafar deck is that you have a Jafar shift target, which is also a Floodborn in Jafar Dreadnought. So I think you've got to be playing 4 copies of that. The Pete's really fascinating in this deck because you can protect your Jafar pretty well. It can be a real problem for your opponent to deal with. If you play like the Jafar on 2, you play Pete on 3, you play another Pete on 4, and then shift your Jafar, they might not be able to stop you. There's also Tink in there, Robin Hood's in there. I think this is a really, really interesting build. I'm not sure about the Magicka Dispel in truth, but it's interesting. But I think the Amethyst Chromicon with Jafar has so much potential. I could see the Queen's Castle coming into the mixer with a deck like this. Of course, it's also pretty heartbreaking not to be playing Chernobyls and Brooms, particularly with their huge synergy with Jafar, but it is, of course, difficult to fit everything in if you go down that route. But with the Library, the Chernobyls, the Brooms, I do like the idea of Archimedes. I do quite like that. So that's pretty cool. Big shout out to you, Christopher B. There's so many decks I'm excited to try out. We've got another Mufasa deck. This one did make the top 4. And this one is very different from Monty's. There is Pluto in the mixer. Kind of interested in Pluto. If you find Pluto on 1, you can play Gaston on 2. And that is pretty scary for a lot of decks to deal with. You've also got the 2-cost Gaston, maybe as a Daisy Duck answer. Pongo's in there. I don't think Pongo really belongs. No Flynn Rider in this one from Brian. I definitely like the addition of Flynn Rider in Monty's, especially when Brian is also playing 3 copies of Sisu and Bolden Warrior and 2 big Sisus. They've also got the Donald Duck in there, which is really, really cool. If ever you're going to play a Donald Duck in a deck, it's this one. But actually, do you know which deck you should play Donald Duck in? No deck. No deck. Maybe Draft. It's a pretty card, but I just don't think it's very good, truth be told. I don't even know what it does exactly. I just know it doesn't do that much. If you shift it in, your opponent loses 2 lore. And obviously there's no shift targets here. And when your opponent has 10 or more lore, it gets +6 strength, I think it is. So there's some synergy there potentially with Maximus. I think Maximus is a really interesting card, which I think a lot of us expected to see some play, and it hasn't really found a home yet. At the end of your turn, if you have any characters in play with 5 strength or more, gain 2 lore. If you have any in play with 10 strength or more, gain 5 lore instead. I think Maximus may be one to keep an eye on in future sets as we get some more characters with 10 strength. Aladdin's in there. That's really interesting. A way of removing lore from your opponent. 2 copies of Scar, only 3 stitches. I would always play 4 of this card. Also on the Super Goose. Interesting to see the differences. Another top 4, we got Mr. Steal Yo Girl. I don't think that's the official name for this deck, mind you, but it's by Carlos R. It's what they've named it, so fair enough. And it is Amethyst, and it is Steel, a deck we know very well on the channel. The first thing which jumps out is there's only 3 copies of a few cards I would personally like to see 4 copies of. That being the Goat, the Snake, the Smee. I would like to see 4 copies of those, if I'm honest. But I also appreciate it's a new set, and people are wanting to try stuff out. They're wanting to squeeze in a couple of extra cards. You know, they want to have 3 copies of the Elsa. They want to have those 2 copies of the Madam Mim Elephant. But I think the Snakes, especially the Snakes, you've got to play 4 Snakes. There's also Cogsworth, Captain Hook in the mixer. There's a couple of Fire the Cannons. There's a couple of Crabs. Zeus with Castle. I think Castle is being criminally underrated by a lot of people at the moment. We know how good it can be. There's also Simba in there to deal with some items or locations. It looks like a solid build. Not convinced by the Elsa, Carlos. I'm not convinced at all by the Elsa. Having said that, maybe I'm underestimating the shift value. You can shift it onto this Elsa. That's kind of cool. Is that really that good, though? Shifting onto a 5-cost character. Do you really want to do that, Carlos? I'm not sure that you do. It's interesting, though. Pete, obviously, in this deck can be played multiple times. And I do think that the color combo has some potential. I think, honestly, I feel like Jafar might be better, though. I honestly feel like Jafar might be better. But you can't really play the bounce package in Jafar. And being able to replay Pete multiple times is definitely very, very spooky and scary and interesting. So, big shout out to Carlos. Cool deck. This game is so fun. Ruby Amethyst came first. We've got the Chernobyls, the Brooms, the library. Only 2 libraries, though, which is interesting. I feel like if you're playing these, maybe some more. Cusco's in there. Brawl. 3 Crabs. No Flins. 1 Elsa, 2 Medusa, 1 CC, 1 B Prep. No set 5 cards, apart from the library. All right, on to the next one. Good job, Sam, for your win. Ruby Amethyst still doing the thing. Also first, so I guess these guys split the first place prize. We've got Shane D also coming first, who is on 3 ice blocks, 4 Sisus. Probably how I would play it as well, 4 of the uninkable Sisus. It is going to make your uninkable count very, very high, but there's a lot of quick decks around. 4 copies of the big Sisu. I also like to see if you're investing this much in the smaller Sisus, why not? You've got Tipo and 1 jump. You've got Vision of the Future for some crazy digging. You've got Tyler and Flavisham to play on turn 3 after a Tipo or a 1 jump if you're not going for the Fishbone. Cusco's a really interesting option in the mirror in particular. The fact that it's putting an item or location into the Inkwell is definitely good against other Tamatoa decks who would otherwise look to grab that Lucky Diamond out of the discard. So, looks like a clean list from Shane. I like it quite a lot. A lot of uninkables. But there we go. All right, up next, we've got Saturday Toronto Set 5 side event at PPG Events Lorcana Top Decks. So this was on a Saturday of the main event, right? Disney Lorcana Challenges, this one in Toronto is about 1,000 people. So about half the size of the usual ones. But this was on the Saturday. So where are the best players? Not in this event. I'm sorry, Adam. I'm not trying to diss you. I'm really not. I'm just pointing that out, that the best players at these side events, especially on the Saturday, are playing. But I think it's great that people are still attending these events, and you're going to have some very strong players in here for sure. People maybe didn't get a ticket, put on the waiting list, still wanted to go, wanted to play some Set 5. I respect it. I would love to go to a Lorcana Challenge and clean up at side events. So up first, we've got Amber Amethyst. Only 2 copies of Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom is a bit of a red flag in this one. 3 Pascals I like, even more heavy on the 1-drops than I am. Also interesting to see 2 copies of Bare Necessities. That looks fine. I just think we need to be playing 4 copies of Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom. Up next, Ruby Amethyst in the top 4. 2 copies of Pinocchio. The Flins are in here. We've got 1 Spellbook, 1 Big Maleficent as well. We've looked at a lot of Ruby Amethyst already. Amethyst Emerald. Now, this is more my style, but where's the Prince John? It's there. Prince John's Purple Dream. Chris Larrabee. Give yourself a pat on the back. Prince John's Purple Dream. I think this is how I would build a deck. Very, very close to this. Maybe the ratios would be slightly different. I'm not sure I'd play Diablo, honestly. Because Lyle, Diablo, and Prince John, that's a lot of... Wait, yeah, there is. So I'm not sure I'd play the Diablo. But I think Merfolk and Flynn are so good, mate. I've always believed in Prince John. You guys know me. But yeah, Diablo, Lyle, and Prince John, all at 3 cost uninkable, and Mother Knows Best and Ursa. That's a lot of 3 costs in it. You've also got the Lucifer in there. So while I like the concept of this deck, it looks like it could maybe be refined a little bit more. But really good job, Chris, on your top 3. I like it. Up next, an Emerald Steel deck by Matt Lopez. Chief Bogo. I think Chief Bogo is a really, really cool card this set. I have to say, I like it a lot. I've always been a big fan of this guy. Dealing 1 damage to each opposing character whenever you play. A Floodborn, of course, Steel and Emerald have quite a lot. You've got Pegasus, Robin Hood, Simba, Tinkerbell, Cheshire Cat. I mean, mate, why are you playing the Cheshire Cat? As someone that played the Cheshire Cat recently, don't do it to yourself. It's not very good. However, with Chief Bogo, there is some synergy there, right? Because you can exert it to banish damaged character. So that's kind of cool. And they are, in fairness, playing the 3-drop Cheshire Cat. So I take it back, Matt Lopez. You do what you want. I respect it. The reason I had the Cheshire Cat last set was in my Sapphire Emerald deck because I was playing Morph and I could shift it in on turn 5 and it could sing Under the Sea on its own. I think I did it once and it was glorious. Ruby Sapphire won this Saturday event. Remember, Saturday event. I do want to stress that. Hideaways in there. 4 Sisus, 3 ice blocks. Very similar to the list we saw previously. Congratulations to Andrew. I'm not trying to take anything away from you, mate. I'm really, really not. Now, this one was a Sunday. There's a couple Sunday events. Now, where are the best players playing on Sunday? In the top cut, not in the side events. We also have to stress that. However, a lot of very, very good players will have been in these tournaments. No doubt about it at all. In fact, in one of these tournaments, we've got a previous Disney Lorcana Challenge champion. So that just shows you. I think the ones on Sunday are much more likely to be of higher quality than the ones on Saturday. The ones on Saturday are very likely to be attendees and still going to be a high quality event. But the one on Sunday is going to be filled with lots of people who didn't quite make it to day 2. And there's lots of very, very, very strong players that don't make it into day 2 of these. So I think that the quality of the one on Sunday you would anticipate should be significantly higher. Not that I'm trying to diminish anyone on day 1, but you guys know what I mean. Anyway, Green Bounce. We've got Carabel in here as well. 3 copies of the big one. Arna's in here. The Emerald Chromicon is pretty interesting to see. During opponent's turn, whenever one of your characters is banished, you may return chosen character to their player's hand. Arna can also, of course, choose 3 different things. Discard, get 2 strength, or banish damaged character. Lyle's in there as well. Sir Hiss is in there as well. Kind of similar to the list we saw Tang Ma playing. They're also on Ursula, Sea Witch Queen. Still a deck I'm looking to try out myself. Steel Songs. Daisy's in there. There's no Queen. There's 2 Piglets. There's 3 Petes, 4 Ursula, 2 Naveen, 2 Stout-Hearted. All right, fair enough. Red Farsa up next. This one's on Daisy and Pluto. Oh, baby, but no Mulan. No Mulan. I'm not sure about that. I do like the idea of Daisy Pluto, though, I have to say. Invited to the Balls in there. This is a new card which reveals the top 2 cards of your deck. Put the revealed character cards into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom in any order. There's 3 teeth, 4 brawls. I feel like the Invited to the Ball here might be a little bit optimistic with 9 non-character cards. You've got 51 characters. I feel like Invited to the Ball is a card I would play 1 copy of, because the more copies of Invited to the Ball you add, the worse the card becomes. That's worth considering. So 3 copies of Invited to the Ball, I feel like might just be slightly off it. I think I would much rather see 1 copy. I think it's a 1 of... Wow, I think it's huge value. Now, obviously, if you replace those other 2 copies with other actions, it doesn't make a difference, but hopefully you get my point there. I think it's an interesting card nonetheless. Doc's in there. There's Sisu, no Flynn Rider in this one. 4 Super Goofs, though. I do like the Super Goof. Super Goof is a card that's growing on me a lot. Only 3 Surface Stitches. I'd like to see 4 of those, honestly. Drop the dragons, guys, in these Mufasa decks. I think it's a meme. Speaking of Disney Lorcana Challenge champions, we've got Edmund Chew. Sorry, mate. It's Ed. Ed was on the channel. We did a banging interview with Ed. Well, I interviewed him, and Ed delivered a banging interview. It was so interesting listening to them talk about their Ruby Amethyst deck, which won Chicago. I think it was Chicago, and it was the one before Toronto, the North American one before Toronto. And they did it with Ruby Amethyst. They had a really interesting list, low on Uninkables, and they're playing Emerald Steel. And I have to say, Emerald Steel is a deck that is very much on my radar this set. I think it got a lot of really, really good stuff. I think Morph, the fact that you can shift Clarabelle onto Morph, I think Morph just got huge, huge value this set. Of course, Beast, Robin Hood, Mother Gothel being a new shift option as well is really, really, really promising for Morph. And this deck has a very high curve. Only one drop in Robin Hood, and the 2 drops are quite slow as well. Mother Gothel more of a 5 drop, but can be shifted on. It's also the 3 drop Clarabelle is a nice shift option. One thing I'm a bit surprised about in Ed's list is not to see Ursula, Deceiver of All. There is a Pete in there, and there's a Cloud Kicker, which I think is a very good card this set. 4 Zeus is a lot. That is certainly a lot, but you've got an abundance of card draw with the Beast, the Robin Hood, the Clarabelle. Very, very interesting deck from Ed. Came second. Big shout out to them. Emerald Steel, definitely a deck I'll be checking out pretty soon, although I'm off traveling again tomorrow. And up first, in number 1 spot, I haven't actually looked at this yet, but it's Gavin. Now, I believe Gavin is on the young side, like 12, 13, 14 years old, that kind of ballpark. Shout out to you, Gavin. What an absolute legend. Look at this deck. It's Sapphire, Amethyst, and they took down Ed in the finals. Give yourself a pat on the back, mate. Chinabox followers and 3 copies of Cogsworth. Still not convinced by Cogsworth, but I don't know. with the crab. There's some cool stuff you can do with it, I guess. I guess you can give your own crab challenger and then give it rush with Cogsworth. If you've got enough card draw, why not? My concern about Cogsworth is how often you're able to play 2 cards from hand and not get punished for it. But I guess maybe this is the deck for it. T-Po's in there as well. There's 3 crabs, 4 Mickeys, 4 libraries. Like, I would love to see the broom in the mixer if you're already on 4 libraries, you know. I really, really would. But what do I know? Gavin knows what they're doing. 2 goats only, 2 castles, 2 bells, 4 Elsa, and 3 big shift Elsa. 2 Let It Goes, 2 Cusco, 2 Yzma, 2 Hades, 2 blue Fassas. That is a very, very interesting top end. You've got Elsa, shift on 6, potentially for some early game control. That is something these decks have lacked a lot in the past, in fairness. So I can see why people are playing the Elsa 5th Spirit as a shift target. It gets value rushing in. You can shift in Elsa for more control and then Cresting Power as well. Very, very cool, actually, the more I think about it. Hades is in there for a bit of control, as is Yzma. Bell can maybe get a bit of control. Bell seems, I guess it's a 5-drop and you're kind of low on 5-drops, right? You play Mickey on 3. You want to play something like a Bell on 4. So very, very cool deck. Also getting in the blue Fassa there. Big shout out to Gavin. Big respect. Up next, we're going to have the other side event, which happened in Toronto. It kicked off an hour later. This one's Sapphire Steel, the first Sapphire Steel deck of the video. Can you believe that? We've been going for 30 minutes and it's the first Sapphire Steel deck. Going for Cusco over Simba. Cusco allows you to put the card into the Inkwell, which is often going to be a downside, but against Lucky Diamond Mirrors, that's going to be a big upside compared to giving that Tamatoa a way of fishing it back. Also playing Pete, 2 Fire the Cannons. T-Po is the new addition really in here. Bell, and 4 Grab Your Swords to try and deal with those aggro decks. We've got Attack for 2, which is a name which I've not heard in a little bit of a while in the Disney Lorcana community. A very good player. So many 1-drops. Actually, there's not that many 1-drops. There's only 8. I got baited by the 1 Olaf, but they're on Flynn, they're on Sisu, they're on 1 Pinocchio, 3 Crabs, 3 Medusas, no Tremaines, and 1 big Sisu alongside 4 Be Prepared. Any set 5 cards? Not a single one. How curious. Brandon won this one in first place with Ruby Sapphire. They're on 3 Ice Blocks and 4 Sisu Daring Visitor. They're on 1 Ruby Chromacon, which can give you a Maui that extra strength to deal with the Queen's Castle. Vision of the Future ×3. Only 2 Brawls. I think Brawl is definitely a card which you can consider bringing less copies of with a deck like this, because you're ramping pretty aggressively with Sapphire. There's not going to be as many Diablos in the metagame since Bucky got removed. Now that could prove to bite you in the back, but I think that you can get away with this deck as well, with Icebox Sisu being a pretty clean answer to Diablo. Maybe Brawl could be cut entirely, but kind of 2 seems like a nice number, really. 4 Tamatoas, 3 Monstrous Dragons, 2 B-Preps, 4 big giant Sisu thingy-majiggers. All right, up next, we're going on to Let the Law Rage On. I think this was the Italian tournament, right? Let me just double check. Nah, this is the Italian tournament. It's the last one we've got. We're going to look at the top 8 in Italy. Italy's got some mean players, and this was a big event, so you would have had a lot of the very best players in Italy attending this one, I'm sure. Shout out to the Italians. We've got Vincent on Steel Amber first, who is on Cinderella, Daisy Duck, Robin Hood, no Queen, 3 Piglets, 2 Bare Necessities. Pete's in there. Alan Adale, Hello Sunshine. Whenever you play a song, gain 1 law. Definitely a very interesting card. 3 Naveen's is quite a lot, and 2 Peditas as well. Pedita can resurrect Vanessa, Piglet, Robin Hood, Daisy Duck, or Cinderella. I'm resin Daisy Duck almost every time. Speaking of Amber Steel songs, we've got another one. This one is on the Queen, and is on the Queen shift. They're on I'll Find Them, I'll Flatten Them. Isn't that curious? Also on Alan Adale. It seems like the Italians are enjoying Alan Adale based off this very small sample size. Pete is in there. Lawrence is in there. 1 Cinderella Stout-Hearted as well. Up next, we've got another Amethyst Steel deck, and it is another Jafar deck also playing Archimedes. This one, however, going for Baboom instead of Fire the Cannons. Also has 4 Smees. I'm liking this one quite a lot so far, I've got to say. 2 Foxes. Fox, even without the big synergies in this deck, I can absolutely see why you'd still play it. It's still a rush character. You can still add something back to your hand to ink. Maleficent's in the mixer. You guys know me. I've not been the biggest fan of Maleficent in my days. No Blue Fairy is pretty interesting, despite having that Dreadnought, despite having the Archimedes, the Robin Hood, the Tinkerbell. I would probably drop the Maleficent for a Blue Fairy here. and you'd be looking at something a little bit closer to what I'd be playing. Admittedly, okay, you've got a lot of 2-drops, but you're also a whole new world deck. You can sing a whole new world and then go wide with 2-drops, right? I think that this deck doesn't have to be quite as all in on Jafar anymore. You've got Robin Hood, you've got Archimedes as consistent shift targets. Blue Fairy, honestly, Blue Fairy looks pretty good to me right now. Blue Fairy last set, nah. Wasn't a big fan of the Blue Fairy builds at all. But I could see Blue Fairy actually being the way to go now. I think you want to play 4 Peats. I do. And I would love to see a Queen's Castle or 2 in these. Queen's Castle is so good if you're playing like a control heavy deck, which this is. So could you protect the Queen's Castle enough and fit it into the deck? It's a challenge, but if you could pull it off, you could have a great deck. I'm actually going to be experimenting a little bit with Jafar this weekend while I'm away in Sweden, where there will be a tournament that I am broadcasting from Sweden. That's going to be really cool. Up next, we've got Mr. Breadfish on Amber and Emerald. And this is another Sing Together deck. Only 1 copy of You're Welcome, but also adding another set 5 card into the mix. Anna. Anna, definitely a card I do quite like as a 1 or 2 of. So I can get behind it. Big downside is it cannot sing We Don't Talk About Bruno. They are still playing the Crickies with only 1 copy of You're Welcome. They're on the Keeders. These just don't change too much, but it's nice to see Anna in the mix there from Mr. Breadfish. I think this deck's very, very good. Into the top 4 we go. We've got Valerio, and they're on the Chernobox. The Brooms, are they on the Library? They're not. That is very curious. They're on Flynn, Sisu, 3 Brawls. I think that's fine. 4 Maleficents, too slow for my taste. 2 copies of Bee King. I love a bit of Bee King. 2 Mauis. I'm not happy about that. 1 Elsa. I want to go to the next deck. Manfro. Maybe they only have 2 Mauis, guys. Maybe they only have 2 Mauis. I mean, I respect the difference, but there's a reason that you play 4 Mauis. Speaking of Mauis, no Maui from Manfro here in Ruby Sapphire. Wow. Very, very interesting indeed. Very, very interesting indeed. This is a very, very unorthodox list. So, Chicha's in the mixer. Chicha is during a turn when you put a card into your Inkwell. If it's the second card you put into your Inkwell this turn, you may draw a card. A very hyped up card, which hasn't really seen play as of yet. Honestly, I can see it in Ruby Sapphire as a card draw tool. You can play it on turn 2, sing 1 jump ahead, bing, bam, boom. You're good to go. Or just play the Fishbone Quill, and you're starting to draw some cards. I think Donald Duck is also a really interesting addition when you're playing Chicha. And Donald Duck, I think, is a really good card, which hasn't really caught on just yet, but I would imagine is going to prove to be pretty popular as things go on. I think in particular, Donald Duck looks great in a Sapphire Steel deck because of its 5 cost. Being able to sing Whole New World, grab your swords. Here it's not singing anything. There's not even how far I'll go for it to sing, which is a bit of a shame. That is a card you tend to see in these decks, but maybe Chicha being the draw engine instead. Of course, Chicha is uninkable. We know these decks really do struggle with uninkable count, but Donald Duck, very, very fascinating to see. 3 B Preps, 3 Sisu Legendaries, and 4 Maleficents. Only 2 of the little ones. Aggro could prove to be a problem, but there's also 3 copies of Hideaway. Put chosen item or location into its player's Inkwell face down and exerted. Of course, you could play this card as a 6-cost character named Kuzco, but Manfro deciding instead just wanting that cheap action to maybe do multiple things in a single turn. Emerald Steel up next. I think only the second of the video. This one's also on Chief Bogo. 4 Clarabelles. Not surprised to see that. Also not surprised to see the Morph and the Tinkerbells. This is very similar to how I would be building it. I really like the look of the Chief Bogo. I'm not personally a huge Diablo fan, and it is a bit weird to only be playing 2 of them. I'm not a huge Diablo fan. I think this deck is kind of crying out for Ursula Deceiver of All, maybe, with the Strength and the Storm. I think she's still very, very good. The 1-drop Clarabelle, I'm also not... I mean, item removal's nice and all, but I would probably be more interested in playing more copies of this Clarabelle, as it can draw. Interesting deck. Definitely an interesting deck. I like the Bogo. I like the Morphs. I like the Peats. Probably would play 4. I think Ursula Pete is something that is very, very strong potentially. Like, you have so much coverage and so much disruption. Ursula and Pete, very similar cards in a sense, right? Denying your opponent's game plan. Pete in the short term, Ursula in the long term. I'm pretty curious about Emerald Steel. I like the look of it quite a bit. Hidden Cove's in there as well, which can be nice, but I think Emerald Steel looks very, very good. I really, really do. And up next, finally, the last deck of the video, we're going to look at Sadler, Ruby, Sapphire. They are on 4 ice blocks, 4 Sisus. It's a item heavy build. Very nice to see indeed. The Maurice's Workshop's in there. The Queen's in there. Fang Crossbow. What does that even do? Chosen character gets -2 strength this turn. Banish this item. Banish. There's got to be something better than the Fang's Crossbow, mate. Right? Right? Maybe if it said, just banish any cow. I don't think cow's a keyword. Not sure about the Fang Crossbow. The rest looks great. I feel like the Ruby Chromicon might be a better addition compared with the crossbow. Also, only 2 copies of Maui's hurts my heart a little bit, but you are needing to obviously play lots of items in this one. And there's also some Sisus. Only 1 dime. Only 1 dime. Not sure about that. I don't know, mate. Only 1 dime is a bit outrageous. I'm not going to lie to you. But it's a very spicy list. Obviously very similar to the list that Ely won with in Disney Lorcana Challenge Bologna. So congratulations to Sadler in Italy. Alright guys, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If I reviewed your deck and I criticized it, please don't take it personally. It's all in good faith and all for the love of the game. I'm just giving you my honest thoughts and opinions. Thanks so much for watching this far. Don't forget to check out Card Market, the sponsor of the channel. And also don't forget to check out the event happening this weekend in Sweden, Malmo Games Week. I'm going to be live streaming it on my channel. If you're in the area, come sign up, come play, see if you can win the prizes on offer.